What if I told you that stepping back actually draws her closer? That distance isn't about detachment, it's about strength. In a world where everyone's striving to be louder, more accessible, and constantly in the mix, the real influence comes from doing the opposite. Less contact isn't about playing hard to get, it's about becoming unforgettable. This video is for the man who's ready to stop chasing, for the man who understands that true attraction doesn't come from effort, it comes from presence. We'll explore why pulling back changes the dynamic, how emotional restraint commands respect, and how adopting a Stoic mindset helps you shift from reacting to radiating magnetism. Because the less you try to prove, the more she feels your presence. Let's get into it. Absence isn't distance, it's depth. Number 1, absence isn't distance, it's depth. You're not avoiding her, you're grounding yourself. Many men think they have to keep talking to stay relevant. But a man who knows his worth understands that his absence speaks louder than words. Think of it this way. If you're always within reach, there's no room for her to truly feel you. When you step back, not out of frustration, but out of intention, you create space for her to miss more than just your words. A Stoic man's presence is felt deeply, even when he's not around. This isn't about playing games or creating confusion. It's about knowing how to give space and letting that space speak for itself. When you're always reaching out, always explaining yourself, and constantly trying to stay on her radar, you may think you're staying connected, but in reality, you're diluting your impact. Genuine connection is built through presence, and sometimes the most powerful presence is felt in the quietest moments. When you pull back with purpose, you're not abandoning her. You're solidifying your own foundation. You become the man who doesn't need constant validation. That's what distinguishes emotional clarity from emotional noise. Epictetus wisely said we should focus only on what we can control, and someone else's attention or approval is outside of that. So instead of clinging to her focus, you turn your attention inward. You work on yourself, build your life, and improve your path. Your energy becomes sharper, not out of resentment, but with clear purpose. Imagine this. She's used to messages pouring in, attention following her everywhere. But then there's you, the one who doesn't chase, the one who takes a step back calmly and with conviction, without a need for explanation. This contrast doesn't go unnoticed. It unsettles her in a way she wasn't prepared for. It's not that you've punished her. It's that your energy has changed. Your absence becomes a mirror, reflecting back to her the strength, stability, and peace you once offered. This is the paradox of presence. You don't need to fill every moment with words to be remembered. Often it's your quiet strength that leaves the deepest mark on her. You're no longer the man who needs to be noticed. You've become the man whose presence is felt even when you're not around. And that's when attraction shifts, not from pressure, but from the peace you embody, not from effort, but from the space you create. Number 2, emotional restraint. Emotional restraint signals value. Look, we've all been tempted to text back fast, to check if she's seen your message, to double text when the first one goes unanswered. It's natural. You cared. You wanted a response, and your instincts told you to reach for closeness. But let's be honest, how many times has that impulse actually deepened the connection? Probably never. Because emotional restraint, especially in a world addicted to instant reactions, isn't just strength. It's rare. And that rarity signals value. When you hold back, not out of fear, but out of discipline, you're sending a silent message. I don't chase, I choose. You're not avoiding connection. You're choosing conscious control. You're showing that you don't place your self-worth in how quickly someone replies or whether they validate your presence. That's not cold. It's composed. It says, I've built something within myself that doesn't crumble under silence. And trust me, that energy is felt even in your absence. Let me give you an example. 2 men text a woman. One follows up within minutes when she doesn't respond. He's sweet, sure, but predictable. The other, he sends one message, then shifts his focus back to his life, his goals, his peace. He's not playing hard to get. He simply isn't needing to be gotten. And that difference, it lingers. She notices it. She starts wondering what's going on in his world because he's not making her the center of it. That's the paradox of emotional attraction. The more you center yourself, the more you draw her toward you. The less you reach, the more room you give her to lean in. And when you give her space to miss you authentically, not manipulatively, your presence becomes more meaningful. As Epictetus said, any person capable of angering you becomes your master. The same is true for neediness. If her delay in replying throws off your whole day, you're giving away your power. But when you choose calm over chaos, focus over fear, you reclaim it. You're not here to be ruled by emotion. You're here to master it. That's what a Stoic man does. He doesn't suppress emotion. He shapes it. He doesn't respond from insecurity. He moves from intention. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, when was the last time you let silence work for you rather than against you? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear how you've used your presence or absence to shift the dynamics in your relationships. Do you agree with the Stoic approach, or have you found your own way to navigate attraction? Drop a comment and let's dive into this conversation. And if you found this valuable, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more insights into Stoicism and modern relationship dynamics. Number 3, mystery awakens curiosity. Mystery awakens curiosity. She doesn't need to know your every move. In fact, the less she knows, the more her mind starts to wander. Why hasn't he called? What's going on in his world? Is he thinking about me? And that curiosity, that subtle, nagging wonder, is exactly where attraction begins to reawaken. You see, when you step back, not out of bitterness, but with intention, you give her space to feel the weight of your absence. Not because you're playing games, but because you're living your life. You're not being shady, you're being sovereign. A man who's grounded in purpose doesn't need to narrate his every move or seek constant reassurance. His silence speaks for him. His distance has energy. When you reduce contact, something unexpected happens. Her imagination fills in the gaps. And that's powerful, because when someone's imagination gets involved, emotions get stirred. She starts to compare the feeling of having you around versus the emptiness. Now she begins to miss not just your presence, but your stability, your calmness, your energy. Most men try to stay relevant by staying loud, but relevance isn't built through noise. It's built through value, and value becomes more noticeable in its absence. A Stoic man understands this. He doesn't chase moments of validation to feel seen. He moves quietly, purposefully. He's not withholding attention to punish. He's just not addicted to being constantly perceived. Like Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought. Foolish and stupid, meaning if your distance makes her confused, that's okay. You're not here to be understood at every step. You're here to walk in alignment with who you are. So, instead of texting out of fear that she'll forget you, choose stillness. Let her feel the shift. Let her sit with the questions. A woman doesn't. Forget a man who had the discipline to step away and the confidence not to explain why. Your mystery becomes your magnet. And what sparks in her mind during that silence? The curiosity, the nostalgia, the craving for clarity is often far more powerful than any perfectly worded message you could have sent. Attraction isn't always about doing more. Sometimes it's about doing less with greater purpose. Speak with your energy. Let your absence echo louder than words, and trust that when you honor your path, the right people will feel it even in your silence. Number 4, presence without performance. Ever felt like you have to entertain her over text just to keep her interested? Stop. You're not a performer. You're a man with presence. Your attention is valuable. And when it's no longer routine, it becomes rare. Rare becomes meaningful. A Stoic man doesn't seek attention. He commands it simply by being centered in who he is with or without applause. What happens when you stop trying so hard to be on? When you stop texting every morning just to keep the spark alive, you create space. Not just for her to miss you, but for her to respect you. See, most men operate out of fear. Fear that if they don't entertain, she'll get bored. Fear that if they're not constantly available, she'll forget them. But here's the twist. That fear actually kills attraction. Because when everything you say starts sounding like a pitch, it feels less like presence and more like performance. Imagine a man who texts her jokes, compliments, updates, memes, constantly feeding her attention, hoping it keeps her hooked. At first, she might enjoy it, but over time, she stops leaning in. Why? Because he's always there, predictable, easy. Now picture another man who checks in when he has something real to say, who lets silence breathe between messages, who doesn't try to impress but simply is. That man feels grounded. That man feels intentional. That man doesn't need to be loud to be noticed. And trust me, she notices. As Epictetus once taught, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. And freedom begins when you stop trying to earn someone's attention through effort and start trusting that your presence, quiet, calm, unshaken, is enough. When your presence isn't driven by pressure to entertain, it becomes an anchor. It gives off the message that you're not seeking applause. You're grounded in self-respect. She doesn't just receive your message, she feels it because it came from a place of stillness, not need. That's why less contact creates more attraction. Not because you're playing games, but because you've stopped trying to win her and started living for something greater than approval. So, let her experience the quiet strength of your presence. Let her miss the man who doesn't perform, but who stands firm like a mountain that doesn't move just because someone looked away. That's the man who leaves a lasting impression. That's the man share members. Number 5, let her feel the gap. You let her feel the gap, you leave. Don't rush to fill the silence. That silence is her mirror. When you stop reaching out, she has to face the emotional weight of your absence. Most men panic in that gap. They try to patch it up with one more message, one more check-in, thinking they'll lose her if they don't stay visible. But here's the truth. What creates attraction isn't more contact. It's meaningful space. The kind of space where your absence isn't a punishment. It's a presence in itself. Think about it. When someone is always around, their value can start to blur. But when they step back, suddenly their presence echoes. Their energy lingers, and that's where curiosity brews. You let the space speak. Let her wonder. Let her reflect. She won't feel your absence if you never give her the chance. You're not being cruel. You're being conscious. You're allowing her mind to roam, to fill in the blanks, to realize what your presence meant only after it's no longer guaranteed. This is where Stoicism comes in. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If her thoughts begin to dwell on you, let them deepen without interference. You don't interrupt that process by showing up too soon. You give her the gift of stillness. And in that stillness, she begins to feel the contrast between a man who needs her attention to feel whole and a man who is whole without needing anything at all. Picture this. She's used to hearing from you every morning. A quick good morning, maybe a meme or a sweet check-in. But one day you stop. Not out of spite, not out of manipulation, but because you've shifted inward to focus on your peace, your purpose. At first, she notices. Then she starts to wonder, is he okay? Then it turns into, does he miss me? And eventually, why do I miss him so much? That's when the gap is doing its quiet work. So don't rush to close it. Don't try to manage how she feels with constant contact. A man who understands his value trusts the space he leaves behind because that's where reflection happens. That's where desire grows. That's where true connection begins. Not in noise, but in stillness. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how silence can make someone reflect more deeply on your presence? The space you leave behind isn't empty. It's where attraction and connection grow. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below or simply type "Silence Speaks." Don't forget to like and share if you found this valuable. Number 6, attention given freely. Is attention given freely is more powerful. More powerful. When you talk less, every message matters more. When you appear less, your presence hits harder. One thoughtful check-in after a week of silence is more powerful than 100 low-effort texts. Why? Because you gave it freely. Not out of need, not out of boredom, not out of fear, but because you chose to. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Intentionality over impulse. Self-command over emotional reaction. Here's the truth. Attention is only powerful when it's rooted in freedom. If you're constantly texting her, calling her, commenting on everything she posts, that attention starts to lose its value. It's no longer a gift. It becomes a routine, something expected, something easy to take for granted. But when you pull back, not to punish, not to manipulate, but to center yourself, that's when your presence becomes rare. And what's rare becomes valuable. Consider this. If someone hears from you all day, every day, your voice blends into the noise. But if you disappear into your purpose for a while, working on your goals, growing silently, holding your frame, and then you reach out with a simple but thoughtful message, it hits completely different. It becomes something she pauses to read, something she thinks about, something that stirs curiosity. That single message carries more emotional weight than 10 days of small talk ever could. Epictetus taught that we should never act from compulsion, but always from conscious choice. You're not texting because you need a response to feel whole. You're not calling to check if she still cares. You're grounded. And from that place of peace, you choose when and how to engage. Imagine you go a few days without reaching out. Not because you're playing games, but because you're genuinely focused on your life. She notices the quiet. She starts to wonder. Then when your message comes, it doesn't feel like obligation. It feels intentional. That's the difference. That's what makes it attractive. So when you think about how to show you care, don't confuse constant access with emotional depth. Sometimes the most meaningful thing you can give is space. And when you return from that space with clarity and purpose, your presence becomes something she not only notices, but feels. That's the power of less contact. That's the magnetism of intentional energy. And that's the kind of presence a Stoic man builds. Not needy, not reactive, but chosen. Let her feel the value of your attention by giving it when it means something, not when your emotions scream for relief. Number 7, clarity over chatter. Clarity over chatter. When you go quiet, things become clear. Is she reaching out because she truly cares, or was it just habit? Is your connection real or just familiar? A man of depth doesn't confuse noise with love. He uses silence to separate what's genuine from what's shallow. When in doubt, don't speak more, observe more. Silence isn't just the absence of words. It's the presence of awareness. In the constant back and forth of modern communication, it's easy to confuse activity for intimacy. But just because someone responds doesn't mean they're invested. Just because the chat keeps going doesn't mean it's building anything meaningful. When you reduce contact, you create contrast. Suddenly, your voice isn't another ping in her notifications. It's something she starts to miss, something that stands out from the noise, and that's where real attraction begins. Not in how often you speak, but in what your absence makes her feel. You've probably seen this before. Maybe you were always the one initiating conversations. Good morning texts, check-ins, memes, compliments. It felt natural at first, but over time you noticed the energy wasn't being matched. So you decide to stop, not to manipulate her, but to observe. And then silence. No response. Days pass. No effort from her side. That moment stings. but it reveals something deeper. She was comfortable receiving, not necessarily connected. Your quiet didn't create distance. It exposed it. That's the power of less contact. It removes the distractions and shows you who values your energy, not just your attention. And here's where Stoicism comes in. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. I seek the truth." That's the mindset. You're not afraid to learn the truth even if it's uncomfortable. You're not clinging to illusions. You're cutting through them. Your silence isn't cold. It's a tool for clarity. It says, "Let me see what remains when I stop trying to hold it all together." And what you'll notice is this. If there was something real, your quiet will draw it closer. She'll start to wonder, to reflect, to reach out, not out of obligation, but desire. Because when you stop feeding something out of habit, only what's alive will respond. A woman who truly feels you will notice when you're gone. She'll sense the shift because you weren't just another conversation. You were presence, intention, and calm. So instead of filling the space with more words, trust the silence. Trust that what's meant for you will move toward you, not away. And trust yourself to see clearly. Because clarity, my friend, is far more powerful than chatter. And clarity is what creates real attraction, not confusion dressed up as connection. You. Teach her how to value you. Number 8. You teach her how to value you. Your communication pattern becomes the standard. If you're always the one initiating, always available, always the first to reach out, she begins to expect it. Not because she's unkind, but because you've set the rhythm. And anything repeated too often, no matter how pure the intention, starts to feel routine. But when you pull back, not with anger, not with games, but with calm purpose, you interrupt that rhythm. You create a space where she has to pause and ask herself, wait, where is she? And that pause is powerful. You see, less contact doesn't mean you careless. It means you care enough about yourself to stop overextending. A Stoic man doesn't chase validation. He doesn't keep talking just to be heard. As Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." When your words are intentional and your presence is earned, not thrown around, it begins to mean something. Women don't respond to noise, they respond to energy. And nothing speaks louder than a man who chooses when to speak and when to step back. Let's say you used to check in with her constantly. Morning texts, midday replies, sending memes at night just to stay on her radar. You thought you were being consistent, but she started replying slower. Maybe she barely noticed when you messaged. That's the moment you stop. Not to play hard to get, but to remind yourself. Your attention is valuable. Don't give it to someone who treats it like background noise. Then the silence begins. A few days pass. Suddenly, she messages, "Hey, you've been quiet." That's the shift. That's not manipulation. It's balance returning. She's starting to realize your presence had weight. Because you taught her by stepping back what happens when you're no longer filling the air with effort. You're not being cold. You're being centered. And a centered man is magnetic. He doesn't beg for connection. He inspires it by how he carries himself. By choosing quality over quantity. By understanding that less contact, when rooted in self-respect, doesn't create distance. It creates depth. So yes, you teach her how to value you. Not with lectures, not with emotional pleas, but with your standards, with your restraint, with your ability to let silence do what words often can't. When a woman sees that you don't need constant attention to feel whole, she begins to see you differently. She starts to feel your worth in your absence. And that's when attraction deepens. Not because you tried harder, but because you needed less. Take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever noticed how the power of your presence changes when you stop giving so much of yourself away? When you create that space, you give her the chance to recognize your worth. Leave a comment and share your thoughts on how less contact has affected your own relationships. How has it shifted the way you're perceived? Let's dive into this together. Number 9. Your life is the attraction. When you're not texting her, what are you doing? That's not a rhetorical question. It's the difference between becoming unforgettable and becoming irrelevant. Because here's the truth. Less contact only creates more attraction when the space you leave is filled with something meaningful. If your silence is just you, sulking, scrolling, waiting for her to notice, then you're not mysterious. You're idle. But if your silence is backed by movement, real movement, then that space becomes magnetic. She doesn't miss a message. She misses the man behind the message. The man housed to speak with calm confidence because he was building something. A man who wasn't always available because his time had value. Maybe she starts wondering, why hasn't he checked in? But that thought quickly evolves into, what is he working on? Who is he becoming without me? That's where attraction blooms. Not from scarcity, but from strength. Let me give you a picture. Imagine you haven't reached out in a few days. You're not cold, not bitter. You're just focused. You're training. You're learning. You're building a future. You're locked in, not locked out. And then maybe she catches a glimpse through social media, mutual friends, or pure intuition that while she's been waiting for a message, you've been creating momentum. That realization stings in a different way. Not because you're ignoring her, but because you're evolving without her. This is where Stoicism comes in. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That's the essence of it. You're not stepping back to punish her. You're stepping forward to fulfill yourself. And when Amen does that, when he chooses purpose over pursuit, mission over messaging, he becomes unforgettable. His presence starts to echo in his absence, not because he begged to be remembered, but because he left a trail of value behind him. So the question isn't, why aren't you texting her? The question is, what are you doing with that silence? If you fill it with purpose, it becomes power. If you fill it with progress, it becomes presence. A woman doesn't miss the guy who begged for attention. She misses the man who no longer needed it. Let her wonder. Let her feel the shift. Let your life do the talking. And if you're walking that path right now, quietly, intentionally, without apology, leave a comment and tell me, what part of your life are you building while staying silent? Or just type, "My growth speaks louder than words." Less contact, more control. Number 10, less contact, more control. Less contact puts the power back in your hands, not to dominate her, but to stop being controlled by your own emotions. And that's the difference most men never understand. They confuse constant communication with connection and end up becoming slaves to their own anxiety. But when you step back, not to play games but to gain clarity, you stop reacting impulsively. You begin to respond with intention. When you're always the one reaching out, always available, you're not just giving her your time, you're giving her your power. But when you create space, when you choose silence over chasing, you begin to reclaim that power. You stop asking, "What does she think of me?" and start asking, "What do I think of myself?" And that shift, that's where attraction begins to grow, because she doesn't feel your neediness. She feels your presence, your groundedness, your calm. As Epictetus taught, freedom begins the moment you no longer allow external things to disturb your inner peace. So instead of texting her when you feel uncertain, take a deep breath and remind yourself. You don't need a response to be secure. You don't need constant contact to be valuable. The more disciplined you are with your emotions, the more magnetic you become. Let's say you've been talking to a woman and she suddenly slows down her replies. Most guys panic. They double text. They ask, "Did I say something wrong?" But a man who understands this principle, he doesn't flood her inbox. He disappears into his purpose. He goes to the gym. He reads. He builds. And guess what happens? She notices the gap he left. She starts to wonder, not because he forced it, but because he chose not to force anything at all. Remember, your silence is not absence. It's energy refocused. Less contact isn't about punishing her. It's about protecting your peace. And when a woman senses that you're not controlled by the need for attention, that you have emotional restraint and direction, it triggers conclusion, something rare in her: respect, curiosity, and yes, attraction. So the next time you're tempted to reach out just to feel something, pause. Reclaim your center. Less contact, more control, not over her, but over you. So, here's the truth, my friend. When you stop trying to prove your value and start embodying it, everything changes. Less contact doesn't create confusion. It creates clarity. And in that silence, you're not just forgotten, you're felt deeply. Because the man who doesn't chase, the man who doesn't beg for space in someone else's life, is the man who commands respect by how he lives his own. That's the Stoic way: calm, grounded, purpose-driven. If this message resonated with you, if you're walking this path of quiet strength and deliberate distance, let me know in the comments what part of this video hit hardest for you. And if you're building in silence right now, type it out. My growth speaks louder than words. Make sure to like this video if it gave you a new perspective. Subscribe if you're ready to level up with more Stoic truths and modern relationship insights, and watch the recommended videos on screen to keep sharpening your mindset. Remember, attraction isn't about how often you reach out. It's about who you are when you don't. Stay centered, stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next own.